Today we're going to talk about how to build a generational map in a Google spreadsheet. But before we get started with that, I'd like to share two verses on why we do iron on iron assessment of our networks and groups and churches and ourselves, and why we do generational mapping. First Timothy 4:16, pay close attention to yourself and your teaching. Persevere in these things, for as you do this, you will ensure salvation both for yourself and for those who hear you. Self-assessment. Know well the condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds. Proverbs 27:23. That's an assessment of our groups and churches. This is super important in the disciple-making church planning process. So, you've received a template from me very easily by just emailing me, and I can give you this template, and it'll basically, once you fill in the data, it'll build your generational map automatically, and it'll say copy generational map template. And so you just click on this name up here, the document name, you click on it and it gives you an opportunity to rename it. So this particular network, their name is Denver T for T. That's the name of the network. We type that in and we hit OK. And then we want to type that in here under network. And now we have the network under that cell and that column. And then we're just going to fill in each of the cells in order to build the generational map automatically right here. As I type in data, you'll watch it build. So the primary trainer for this church is James Bell. And his trainer, we'll just put me as his trainer, Chuck Wood. Field 1 is the entry strategy, and what we're measuring here is far from God. They've got 0 far from God in their church. Baptisms, they've had 2 baptisms in their church. And then A-teams, they've got 5 A-teams. And then field 3, what lesson they're on. This particular church is in long-term discipleship, so they're going through Mark, and they're in Mark chapter 2. Then field 4, what do they consider themselves? They have self-identified as a church. It could be a group, an online group, or the X is a group that has faded away or died. Then the description, we're just going to put Bell's house. That's where they meet. You can put anything in there that you want to distinguish your groups. And then the address, all you need is a major crossroads and then the city and the state. So we're going to say Main Street and Broadway in San Antonio, Texas. And you notice that the text right here, if it doesn't show up in its full form, you just go up here and click on that cell and you'll get text wrapping. And so that's pretty easy that way. Network coordinator, James Bell, is overseeing this network. So we put his name and then his email in here. Okay, so we filled in for one group, one church, and we've got all the data for that church, and we notice that the generational map has already started building. Chuck Wood is the trainer's trainer, and James Bell is the primary trainer for this church. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start filling in this data. I'm going to fast forward it, and you watch the generational map build. And once we get done, we'll talk about some of the nuances in the data. Okay, we've filled in all the data, and you notice that the generational map built as we filled in the data. It just automatically builds as an organizational chart. Now let's look at some of the nuances of the data. First off, when we filled in the network, in order to, it's all the Denver T for T network. So if you want to copy that all the way down, you just grab this little box right here and drag it, and it'll add as many to the column as you want. Now we don't have that many, so let's delete those. And so it's all Denver T for T network, whatever you want to name your network. Primary trainer, that's the primary person that is leading that group, church, online group, or in this case, you notice this X. This is a group that died. Now you may wonder, why do we want to keep track of groups that died? Well, there's data in that group that's probably pretty important, like the number of baptisms. You can keep track of how many baptisms that were in that group. But the other thing too is that when a group dies, believe it or not, keeping track of that is pretty important, because a lot of people, when they start this process, they think it's just everything's going to go perfectly, and it doesn't. And so a lot of groups die, and that's actually an encouragement to people just getting started. When a group dies, they don't think that they're all alone out there. So it's good to kind of keep track of the groups or churches that fade away. All right, next is trainer's trainer. So Chuck Wood is training James Bell. Now you'll notice that James Bell has 3 groups, but when you look down here, only 1 node shows up. That's because James, all of his groups fall under that 1 node, which I personally really like, because that stresses generational growth rather than addition. I mean, we could have 10 groups here in this second generation and go on and on and on, but what we're really after is generational growth. So all 3 of those groups that James Bell's leading is under this node. Okay, and then you see where Chad Vinny, he's the next generation, and Bill Smith, they show up. But notice Bill has 2 groups. They both show up underneath this 1 node. And then he is into the 4th generation with Joel Harvey, and then the 1 dead group. All right, so we have the trainer's trainer. One of the things you need to be very careful about, if you have nodes that just show up all by themselves, it's usually because you don't have the trainer's trainer right. And so be very careful when you fill that out. We already talked about the 4 fields and what each of those mean. Just an explanation on the 3rd field. Mark chapter 2, that's long-term discipleship. C7, that's just short for command number 7. H3, story of hope number 3, and everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Here in the 4th field, they're either church or group, or you see here an online group that's meeting in Berlin. They're using Google Hangouts, and so they have people from Berlin that they're training. That's pretty cool. And then of course you have the group that died. Description, that's just something to give you a handle on further identifying those groups. And then again you have the address. Now the reason why this is important is because we're plotting our churches, groups, and online groups on the map. And so if you give me a major crossroads near that location, then that's, and the city and the state, that's good enough for it to show up on Google Maps. Now the reason why we don't give an exact address is just for security's sake. So you can do that if you want. And then the network coordinator, the person that's overseeing this entire network that you see with the Gen map, is James Bell, and here's his email address to get a hold of him. So those are all the nuances that you have in the data, but it makes this really easy to build a generational map. We were using the PowerPoint template and people were getting confused on that thing. This just lines it out very smoothly and builds your generational map very easily. And what you can do is, with the generational map here, you can save it as an image. You can move it to a different sheet. You can make it its own sheet. If this starts getting really big, you can adjust it. So this has a lot of flexibility and it's very simple. This is a very simple generational map and all your data that you need is up here. So I hope this is very helpful. You just go ahead and fill out your data and build your generational charts, and then we'll just patch them into our generational map, and that's how we get the compilation for the entire Jesus Up In and Out network. If you need this template, just email me. I'll send you the template. If you need coaching, email me and we'll help you out the best we can.